15 years had passed since my coronation as empress, and the empire had never been more prosperous. Yet standing in the grand throne room watching my sons kneel before their father, I felt an old familiar tension coiling in my chest. "Rise, Prince Jen. Rise, Prince Rui." Emperor Han's voice carried the weight of authority that still made court ministers tremble, though it always softened when he spoke to our boys. They stood in perfect unison, these twin miracles who'd shattered every lie told about us. At 25, they were the empire's pride. Jen, elder by 15 minutes, possessed my strategic mind and careful deliberation. Rui had inherited his father's military brilliance and that dangerous charisma that made soldiers willing to die for him. But today, neither looked particularly proud or charismatic. They looked trapped. "The matter of your marriages can no longer be delayed," Han continued, and I watched both our sons' shoulders tense imperceptibly. "The empire requires heirs. Stability demands it." I said nothing, simply observed from my throne beside my husband. This was his show, though we'd planned every word together the night before. "Prince Jen," Han's gaze settled on our eldest. "You will wed Lady Chen Suyin, daughter of Prime Minister Chen. The betrothal documents will be signed within the week." Jen's face remained perfectly composed, but I saw his jaw clench. "Just once. Just enough. Prince Rui, you will wed Lady Feng Lihua, daughter of Merchant Feng. Her dowry and commercial connections will strengthen our economic position." Rui's eyes flickered to me for just a moment. A question. A plea, perhaps. I kept my expression neutral. "You are dismissed to prepare. The weddings will take place in 3 months." Both princes bowed with flawless precision and retreated from the throne room with measured steps that betrayed nothing of whatever storms raged beneath. The moment the doors closed, Han turned to me with one raised eyebrow. "How long before one of them breaks?" "Jen will suffer in silence until he makes himself sick," I said, rising from my throne and stretching. "Rui will probably punch something, then come storming to us within the week. Your maternal intuition is showing. 15 years of raising them gives me certain advantages." I moved to the window overlooking the palace gardens where I could see both princes walking in opposite directions. "The question is whether they'll confide in each other first, or come to us separately." Han joined me at the window, his arm settling around my waist in that familiar gesture that still made my heart skip after all these years. "You really think this plan will work?" "It has to. They need to learn the same lesson we did. That duty and desire aren't always enemies. That sometimes the heart knows what the mind refuses to accept. And if they simply comply, marry these women without protest." I smiled, thinking of the detailed intelligence reports sitting in my private study. "They won't. Trust me." That evening, I was reviewing commercial contracts in my study when Steward Fu appeared at the door looking faintly amused. "Your Majesty, Prince Rui requests an audience. He appears somewhat agitated." I set down my brush. "Show him in." Rui entered like a thunderstorm given human form, all barely restrained energy and righteous fury. He bowed perfunctorily before erupting. "Mother, you cannot allow this." "Allow what, exactly?" "This marriage. Lady Feng, she's a merchant's daughter. The court ladies already mock her family. I've heard what they say. Nouveau riche. Uncultured. Not good enough for imperial blood." His hands clenched into fists. "They'll destroy her the same way they tried to destroy you." I gestured for him to sit, but he remained standing, pacing like his father before a battle. "And this concerns you because it's wrong. Because she doesn't deserve to be married into a family where half the court will treat her like dirt. Because," he stopped abruptly, jaw working. "Because you've met her," I finished softly. He looked away. "Once. Briefly. At a garden party last month. She was sitting alone because the other ladies were whispering about her dress being too expensive, too gaudy, too merchant class. I saw her face, Mother. She heard every word and just sat there taking it with this perfect serene smile that didn't reach her eyes at all. And what did you do? I sat with her. We talked about silk trade routes and textile quality. He laughed without humor. She knows more about imperial commerce than half your economic ministers. But that doesn't matter to them, does it? They only see where she came from. I studied my younger son, seeing so much of his father in the protective fury radiating from him. You're right. Many at court will treat her exactly as they once treated me. The question is, will you let that stop you from giving her a chance? Or will you break the engagement to save her from discomfort, which would actually shame her and her family far worse? Rui stopped pacing. I don't know. That's why I'm here. No, you're here because you wanted me to tell you it's acceptable to care about a merchant's daughter. You wanted permission to see her as worthy. I set down my teacup with deliberate precision. I can't give you that permission, Rui. You already know she's worthy. The question is whether you're brave enough to stand beside her when others say she isn't. He stared at me for a long moment, then bowed deeply. Thank you, Mother. After he left, I waited exactly 1 incense stick's worth of time before Steward Fu returned. Prince Jian requests an audience, Your Majesty. Of course he does. My elder son entered with his usual controlled grace, though I noticed the tension in his shoulders, the shadows under his eyes. Mother, I need your counsel. Sit. Tell me. Jian settled across from me, hands folded in his lap with deceptive calm. This betrothal to Lady Qian. It's politically advantageous. Prime Minister Qian controls significant court factions. The marriage would secure their support for the next generation. All true. Lady Qian is educated, accomplished, beautiful by all accounts. She would make an acceptable crown princess. Also true. Then why does accepting this betrothal feel like a betrayal? There it was. I kept my expression gentle. Betrayal of what? I don't know. That's the problem. He finally looked at me, and I saw genuine anguish in his eyes. I should be grateful. Honored. This is duty. This is what princes do. We marry for the empire, not ourselves. Is that what you believe? Or what you think you should believe? Jian was quiet for a long moment. 2 years ago, during the Northern Inspection Tour, there was an assassination attempt. Do you remember? Vividly. Your father didn't sleep for a week. What the reports didn't mention was how I survived. The poison dart that should have killed me, a physician traveling with a merchant caravan extracted it. Treated the wound. Sat with me through 3 days of fever when the infection nearly finished what the assassin started. My heart began beating faster, but I kept my voice level. This physician has a name. Wei Lin. She runs a clinic in the merchant district. Treats anyone who comes to her door regardless of their ability to pay. She's brilliant, Mother. Not just as a physician but as a person. She sees problems and solves them. She doesn't care about status or protocol or any of the nonsense that consumes this court. And you've seen her again since the assassination attempt. It wasn't a question. Jian's slight flinch confirmed it. I couldn't stop myself. I made excuses to visit the merchant district. Inspections. Charity work. Anything to justify being near her clinic. We talked. About medicine, governance, philosophy, everything. She challenges me, Mother. Makes me think in ways no one else does. She sees me, not Crown Prince Jian, but just Jian. And I. His voice cracked slightly. He cleared his throat. I love her. Completely. Impossibly. And marrying Lady Qian feels like burying the only genuine thing in my life. I reached across and took his hand. Your father once told me something when we were negotiating the terms of our own marriage. He said he'd spent years being what everyone needed him to be, wearing so many masks he'd forgotten his own face. Until someone saw through all of them. What did you tell him? That I knew exactly what he meant. I squeezed his hand. Jian, you're going to be emperor someday. That burden is inescapable. The question is whether you'll carry it alone, partnered with someone who sees you as a crown to possess, or with someone who sees you as a person worth knowing. But the political consequences are real. And significant. And not insurmountable. I released his hand. Your father and I didn't build this empire by always choosing the safe path. We built it by choosing the right one, even when it was difficult. He looked at me with desperate hope. What should I do? I can't tell you that. But I can tell you that settling for acceptable when you've found extraordinary is a betrayal. Not of duty, but of yourself. And emperors who betray themselves make poor rulers. After Jen left, Han emerged from behind the screen where he'd been listening to both conversations. "You're enjoying this far too much," he observed. "Am I? Our sons are in agony. Temporary agony that will teach them invaluable lessons." He settled beside me, pulling me against his side. "Though I notice you didn't mention the other reports. About Prime Minister Chen's embezzlement. Or Lady Chen's affair with General Zhao. Or the spy network Merchant Feng's daughter is running to help abused women escape bad marriages." I smiled into his shoulder. "I thought I'd let them discover some things on their own. We can't solve all their problems. You're devious." I learned from the best. The next weeks were a study in princely suffering. Jian threw himself into administrative duties with almost manic intensity, spending 16-hour days reviewing policy documents and avoiding all social occasions where he might encounter Lady Chen. Rui volunteered for every possible military assignment that took him away from the palace, though I noticed he made a point of being present at every court function Lady Feng Lihua attended, positioning himself like a guard dog ready to attack anyone who looked at her wrong. The brothers barely spoke to each other, each trapped in their private miseries. Until the hunting expedition. It was meant to be a celebration before the upcoming weddings. The entire court decamped to the imperial hunting grounds for 3 days of sport and pageantry. I tried to excuse myself, claiming administrative duties, but Han had given me that look that meant "You started this, you'll see it through." So I found myself in an elaborate pavilion watching nobles compete to kill the most deer while servants rushed about with refreshments and musicians played cheerful hunting songs that did nothing to lift the oppressive atmosphere. Lady Chen Suyin sat in the place of honor beside the dais, looking every inch the perfect future crown princess. Beautiful, poised, dressed in expensive silks that somehow managed to be both elegant and just ostentatious enough to remind everyone of her father's power. She smiled at all the right moments, laughed at appropriate jokes, and watched Jen with calculating eyes that made my skin crawl. Lady Feng Lihua sat at the far end of the pavilion, isolated from the cluster of noble ladies who were making no effort to hide their whispered mockery. She wore simpler robes in subtle colors that probably cost more than most of theirs combined, though they'd never admit it. Her face maintained that serene mask Rui had described, but I saw her fingers trembling slightly where they gripped her fan. Rui saw it too. He'd been standing with a group of young officers, but his attention kept drifting to Lihua. When one of the court ladies said something that made the others laugh while looking directly at her, I watched my son's jaw clench with barely suppressed fury. He started toward her, but Lihua caught his eye and gave the smallest shake of her head. A warning. "Don't make it worse." He froze, conflict written all over his face. "Your younger son is about to cause a scene," Han murmured beside me. Where's Jen?" "Supposedly scouting the western perimeter. Actually, I believe he's hiding in the forest to avoid Lady Chen's very determined attempts at conversation." I had to hide my smile behind my wine cup. The afternoon dragged on. I was considering claiming a headache and retreating when a servant rushed into the pavilion, face pale with panic. "Your Majesties, we've lost contact with the prince's hunting party. And there are reports of armed men in the western forest." The entire pavilion erupted in chaos. Han was on his feet immediately, barking orders for guards to mobilize. I remained seated, heart pounding, forcing myself to maintain imperial composure even as every maternal instinct screamed at me to run into that forest myself. "How many men?" Han demanded. "Unknown, Your Majesty. At least a dozen. They're not bandits. Too well organized, too well armed. Assassins." Again. Han's eyes met mine, and I saw my own fear reflected there. "Mobilize the full guard. I'm leading the search personally. Your Majesty, your safety. My sons are in that forest. Move." I gripped the arms of my chair so hard my knuckles went white. This couldn't be happening again. Not to both of them. Not after everything. The wait was excruciating. Guards thundered off into the forest while the rest of us sat in that pavilion pretending we weren't imagining the worst. Lady Chen looked appropriately concerned, though I noticed she'd positioned herself where she could watch the forest path while making sure everyone saw her distress. Lady Feng Lihua had gone completely pale, her facade finally cracking as she stared at the tree line with undisguised terror. It was nearly sunset when we heard the commotion. Soldiers returning, and voices shouting orders. I was on my feet before I realized I'd moved, Han beside me as we rushed to the pavilion entrance. They came through the trees in a chaotic procession. Rui supporting Jen, both covered in blood and dirt. Behind them, a squad of guards dragging captured assassins. And between the princes, supported by Jen and another soldier, a woman in torn physician's robes with blood streaming from a wound in her shoulder. Wei Lin. It had to be. Physicians, I shouted, already moving toward them. Now. Mother, I'm fine, Jen protested, though he looked ready to collapse. Lin took the worst of it. I'm also fine, the woman said through gritted teeth. Though I'd appreciate if everyone stopped jostling my shoulder. Rui was bleeding from a cut across his ribs, but his attention was fixed on Lady Feng Lihua, who had pushed through the crowd and was staring at him with wide eyes. You're hurt, she said, that serene mask completely gone, replaced by genuine fear. It's nothing. But you shouldn't be. Don't you dare tell me what I should or shouldn't do. She grabbed his arm with surprising strength. Sit down before you fall down, you idiot. Despite everything, I saw Rui smile. The chaos slowly resolved itself into order. The imperial physicians descended on our sons while I personally supervised Wei Lin's treatment, partly because she was injured protecting my child, and partly because I wanted to meet the woman who'd captured Jen's heart. She bore the physicians' ministrations with impressive stoicism, barely flinching as they cleaned and stitched the deep gash in her shoulder. Majesty, she said as they worked, I apologize for the intrusion. I was following the hunting party to observe rare medicinal herbs in this region. When I saw the attack, I couldn't just. You saved my son's life. Again. I met her eyes directly. That requires no apology, only my eternal gratitude. She looked surprised, then suspicious. Jen told you? My son tells me many things. Including that you're brilliant, compassionate, and see through the masks people wear. I'm also a commoner with no connections and no political value whatsoever, Wei Lin said bluntly. I assume that's been mentioned as well. I liked her immediately. That too. Though I'd argue value comes in many forms. Across the pavilion, Lady Feng Lihua had taken over supervising Rui's treatment, overruling the physicians about proper bandaging techniques and arguing about herbal remedies with such confident expertise that even the imperial physicians looked impressed. Where did you learn field medicine? One of them asked, clearly baffled. My merchant caravans travel dangerous routes, she said calmly, wrapping Rui's ribs with practiced efficiency. I make it my business to know how to treat injuries. Among other things. Rui was staring at her like he'd never seen her before. You've been managing your family's businesses yourself. Since I was 16. My father has excellent strategic vision but terrible attention to detail. Someone had to actually run things. She tied off the bandage with a sharp tug that made him wince. Stop looking at me like that. And next time you want to protect me from court gossip by avoiding me at social functions, perhaps consider that being publicly ignored by your betrothed is actually more humiliating than a few whispered insults. I didn't mean. Rui looked completely off balance. I thought I was helping. You thought wrong. I don't need protection. I need partnership. Or nothing at all. She stood, brushing off her robes. Think about which one you want. She walked away with her head high, leaving Rui looking poleaxed. I think I'm in love with her, he said to no one in particular. Just now realizing that. Jen called from where physicians were checking his pupils for signs of concussion. The rest of us figured it out weeks ago. The captured assassins provided concerning intelligence once properly interrogated. They were professionals, well-funded, and according to their leader's eventual confession, hired through an intermediary connected to Prime Minister Qian's household. Han and I reviewed the evidence in our private chambers that night while our sons recovered in the medical wing. It's enough to investigate, Han said, scanning the interrogation reports. But not enough to accuse. The connection is too indirect. Then we need to be more direct. I pulled out my own files, the ones I'd been compiling for months. Prime Minister Qian has been embezzling from the military supply budget. Small amounts over time, carefully hidden, but the pattern is clear. He's also been accepting bribes from merchants seeking favorable trade contracts. How long have you known this? 6 months. I've been waiting for the right moment. I spread the documents across our table. And here's something even more interesting. Lady Chen has been conducting a rather indiscreet affair with General Zhao. Multiple witnesses, love letters, secret meetings. All very scandalous. Han raised an eyebrow. You've been busy. I'm the Empress. It's my job to know these things. I tapped another document. But this is what seals it. 3 days ago, Lady Chen visited a fortune teller in the market district. According to my agent who happened to be there, she asked what would happen if the elder prince died before the marriage. The fortune teller told her she'd be free to marry the younger prince instead. Ambitious and cold-blooded. A dangerous combination. Sound familiar? I met his eyes. Though unlike my former mother-in-law, Lady Chen has the intelligence to actually execute her schemes. The assassination was meant to kill Jian. With him gone, she could marry Rui, who's more charismatic and beloved by the military. And with her father controlling court politics, they'd effectively rule the empire. What do you want to do? I gathered the documents with careful precision. I want our sons to make their own choices. But I also want them to have all the information necessary to make those choices wisely. Tomorrow, we'll have a family discussion. The next morning, I summoned both princes to our private study. They arrived looking somewhat recovered, though Jian moved stiffly and Rui kept favoring his injured ribs. Sit, I said without preamble. We need to talk. Han stood by the window while I remained at our desk, the evidence files prominently displayed. The assassination attempt yesterday was not random, I began. The men who attacked you were hired killers, funded through Prime Minister Chen's household. Both princes went very still. We have evidence that Prime Minister Chen has been embezzling imperial funds and accepting bribes for years. We also have evidence that Lady Chen Suyin has been conducting an affair with General Zhao while preparing to marry you, Jian. And most damningly, we have witness testimony that she consulted a fortune teller about what would happen if you died before the wedding. Jian's face had gone carefully blank, that mask he wore when processing information he didn't want to feel. She wanted me dead. We believe so. With you gone, she could marry Rui, who is more popular with both the military and common people. Combined with her father's court influence, they'd effectively control the succession. Mother, Rui said carefully, how long have you known about this? The embezzlement and bribery? Several months. The affair and fortune teller visit? More recently. The assassination connection? As of last night's interrogations. And you didn't tell us? No. I didn't. Why not? Jian's voice was ice-cold, the tone he used in court when someone had disappointed him profoundly. I met his anger steadily. Because you needed to learn something first. Both of you. Learn what? That our betrothals were traps. That we were pawns in someone else's political games. Jian stood, wincing at the movement. We could have avoided all of this if you just told us from the start. No, Han said from the window, speaking for the first time. You would have known Lady Chen was unsuitable. But you wouldn't have known why the marriage felt wrong in your heart. You'd still be trapped by duty, just with better information. I stood as well, facing my angry sons. When your father proposed to me 15 years ago, I was a divorced woman labeled barren by everyone who mattered. Marrying him made strategic sense. Protection, status, escape from my enemies. But that's not why I said yes. Then why did you? Rui asked quietly. Because when he looked at me, he saw a person worth knowing. Not a political asset or a merchant's daughter or a barren cast-off. He saw me. And I saw him, the man behind the terrifying reputation. Everything else we built came from that foundation. I moved around the desk, standing before them. You're both facing marriages that make political sense. Lady Chen brings her father's court faction. Lady Feng brings commercial connections and wealth. On paper, perfect matches. But marriages aren't lived on paper. They're lived in private moments, difficult decisions, and the accumulation of years. The question isn't whether these marriages are politically advantageous. The question is whether these women see you, truly see you as anything more than titles to acquire. But we have duties, Jen said, though his voice had lost some of its anger. The empire requires strong leadership. Leadership comes from strength of character, not political marriages to corrupt families. Han moved to stand beside me. Your mother and I broke every convention when we married. A war god prince and a barren cast-off. Everyone said it would weaken the empire. Instead, we gave it 15 years of unprecedented prosperity and 2 brilliant heirs. So what are you saying? Rui looked between us. That we should just marry whoever we want regardless of consequences? No, I said firmly. I'm saying you should marry people who make you stronger. People you can trust absolutely when everything else falls apart. People who see you as partners, not prizes. I gestured to the files. Prime Minister Chen planned to use his daughter to control the throne. Lady Chen was willing to arrange your murder to improve her prospects. Is that the foundation you want for your future? Jen sank back into his chair, looking suddenly exhausted. What about Lady Feng? Is she part of some scheme as well? Actually, I pulled out a different file, this one considerably thicker. Lady Feng Lihua is one of the most remarkable women in the empire. And almost no one knows it. I slid the file to Rui, who opened it with obvious trepidation. For the past 7 years, she's been running a secret network that helps women escape abusive marriages. She uses her family's merchant caravans to transport them to different cities, provides them with new identities, and helps them establish independent livelihoods. She's saved over 300 women. Rui stared at the documents, flipping through page after page of meticulously organized records. How did you discover this? One of the women she helped now works in the palace. She recognized Lady Feng at a court function and told me the whole story. I smiled. Apparently, your betrothed isn't the timid merchant's daughter she pretends to be. She's actually quite dangerous when protecting people she cares about. 300 women, Rui repeated, awe in his voice. She's been doing this since she was 18. Using her own money, her own resources, at considerable personal risk. If any of the noble families she's helped women escape from discovered her involvement, they'd destroy her reputation and her family's business. But she does it anyway because she believes it's right. I paused, letting that sink in. That's the woman you're betrothed to. Someone who risks everything for people who can give her nothing in return. Someone with the intelligence to run these operations undetected for years, and the courage to stand up to the entire noble class. The question is whether you're worthy of her, not the other way around. Rui closed the file reverently. I need to talk to her. Yes, you do. But first, we have a more immediate problem. Han returned to the evidence of Prime Minister Chen's crimes. We need to handle this carefully. He's powerful, well-connected, and dangerous when cornered. Any accusations will need to be absolutely airtight. Jen, who'd been silent during the discussion about Lady Feng, finally spoke up. What about Lady Chen herself? Is she being charged? That depends, I said carefully. The affair is embarrassing but not illegal. The fortune teller consultation is suspicious but not proof of conspiracy. The assassination connection is indirect. A skilled lawyer could argue she knew nothing of her father's plans. But you don't believe that? No. I think she knew exactly what was happening. But proving it is another matter. Jen stood again, moving to the window where he stared out at the palace grounds. I need to speak with someone. Then I'll tell you what I think we should do. Wei Lin? I asked gently. He turned, surprised. You know? Jen, you're my son. Of course I know. Just as I know you've been sneaking into the merchant district twice a week for the past year and a half, supposedly conducting infrastructure inspections but actually spending hours in a certain clinic discussing medicine and philosophy. He had the grace to look embarrassed. I thought I was being discreet. You were. But I'm the Empress. Discreet and invisible are different things. I moved to stand beside him. I also know that Wei Lin is brilliant, principled, and sees through pretension like it's glass. I know she challenges you, makes you think, and treats you like a person rather than a prince. And I know that losing her would break something in you that political advantage could never repair. She's a commoner, mother. No family connections, no political value. Marrying her would gain us nothing. It would gain you a partner you can trust absolutely. In my experience, that's worth considerably more than political alliances with people plotting your murder. I touched his shoulder gently. Your father and I are going to expose Prime Minister Chen and break your betrothal to Lady Chen. What you do after that is your choice. But choose wisely. Choose for the right reasons. And choose someone who sees you. He covered my hand with his, silent for a long moment. Thank you, Mother. After they left, Han pulled me into his arms. You're giving them a tremendous amount of freedom. We're giving them the same choice we had. To build something real rather than something politically expedient. I leaned into his warmth. Besides, we have enough evidence to destroy Prime Minister Chen 10 times over. The rest will sort itself out. You're very confident. I raised them. I know what they're capable of. Trust me. The next days moved with the measured pace of gathering storms. Han quietly mobilized trusted court officials to review the evidence against Prime Minister Chen. I coordinated with my commercial network to ensure no financial irregularities could be hidden or explained away. And our sons disappeared to have whatever conversations they needed with the women who'd captured their hearts. Jen returned from the merchant district looking lighter than I'd seen him in months. Rui came back from his meeting with Lady Feng wearing a smile that could have powered the sun. She's terrifying, he announced happily. Absolutely terrifying. She spent 20 minutes lecturing me about making assumptions and another hour explaining her entire operation. Did you know she's developed a coded system using textile patterns to send messages between safe houses? Brilliant. And? I prompted. And I told her I don't care what the court thinks. I don't care about gossip or politics or any of it. I want to marry her because she's the most extraordinary person I've ever met, and spending my life with anyone else would be settling for less. He grinned. She said I was being overly dramatic. Sounds like an excellent match. She also said if I was serious, I needed to prove it by publicly supporting her work. No secret wife, no hidden partnership. If we're doing this, we're doing it completely. She wants to expand her network, establish official safe houses, change actual laws about women's rights. Han whistled low. Ambitious. That's what I said. She told me ambition was only a problem if you lacked the capability to execute. Then she showed me her 5-year plan. Father, it's comprehensive. Brilliant. Revolutionary. She wants to transform how the empire treats women, and she has an actual strategy to make it happen. I exchanged glances with Han. And you're prepared to support that? It will be controversial. Let it be controversial. You changed the empire by refusing to accept limitations. Why shouldn't we continue that work? Rui's expression turned serious. Besides, after watching what she's already accomplished with no resources and no official support, I'm curious what she could do with imperial backing. We could actually make a difference. Yes, I said softly, you could. Jen's conversation with Wei Lin had apparently been equally productive, though he approached it with characteristic careful planning. I offered her a position as chief imperial physician, he told us that evening. Officially, she'd be responsible for reforming the imperial medical system and establishing public clinics throughout the capital. Unofficially, it would give her status and position. Make her someone the court has to acknowledge. And she said? Han asked. She said if I was trying to make her acceptable through a title, I'd fundamentally misunderstood both her and the situation. She doesn't want to be acceptable. She wants to be valuable. And the value comes from the work, not the position. I couldn't help smiling. Wise woman. Very. She also said that if I wanted to marry her, it should be because I genuinely wanted a partner who'd challenge me, not because I was trying to recreate some romanticized version of you and father. He looked slightly embarrassed. She's read extensively about your marriage. Apparently, it's become something of a legend in merchant districts. Has it now? The barren cast-off who became empress and transformed the empire's economy. It's an inspiring story, according to Lin. But she pointed out that she's not you, I'm not father, and trying to copy someone else's path is a recipe for disaster. I like her more and more, Han said. She accepted the position as chief imperial physician. But she made it clear that's separate from any personal relationship. If we marry, it's because we're genuinely suited to each other, not because of titles or politics or family pressure. Jen smiled slightly. Then she made me help at her clinic for 6 hours. Said if I wanted to understand her work, I should actually do it. I spent the evening stitching wounds and mixing medicines while she supervised. And I prompted. And it was the best evening I've had in years. No pretense, no politics, just solving problems and helping people. She was in her element, completely brilliant. And she looked at me like I was just another set of hands, which was somehow incredibly refreshing. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. I want to marry her, Mother. Not because it makes political sense, though I think she'd actually be an excellent empress. Not because you and Father approve, though I'm grateful you do. But because she makes me want to be better than I am. Smarter, braver, more genuine. When I'm with her, I'm not Crown Prince Jen. I'm just myself. And that's worth more than any political alliance. Then marry her, I said simply. But first, we need to handle the current situation. The trap was set for the following week. Han called a full court session, ostensibly to finalize the prince's marriage contracts and discuss wedding preparations. Prime Minister Chen arrived in full ceremonial regalia, radiating smug satisfaction. Lady Chen accompanied him, looking every inch the future crown princess. What they didn't know was that we'd spent the previous days carefully positioning our evidence and allies. Loyal ministers held copies of the financial records. Witnesses to Lady Chen's fortune teller visit were waiting in an antechamber. The interrogated assassins, still in custody, had provided detailed written confessions. The court assembled in full formal array. I sat beside Han in my empress regalia, projecting serene authority while my heart hammered with anticipation. Our sons stood below the dais in their prince's robes, faces carefully neutral. Han allowed the opening formalities to proceed normally. Ministers presented reports, petitions were heard, routine business conducted. Prime Minister Chen grew increasingly confident as the session progressed toward the marriage announcements. Then Han shifted the tone. Before we proceed to the happy matter of our sons' betrothals, we must address a troubling issue that has come to our attention. His voice carried the weight of imperial authority. It concerns irregularities in the military supply budget. Prime Minister Chen's smile faltered slightly. Your Majesty, I assure you any irregularities are merely accounting errors that can be easily explained. Can they? I spoke for the first time, my voice cutting through his bluster. Can you explain why supply requisitions show purchases of 5,000 bolts of fabric at premium prices, yet the military warehouses only received 3,000 bolts of inferior quality? Can you explain where the difference went? Your Majesty, I would need to review the specific records. We have the records. Han gestured, and Steward Fu stepped forward with arms full of ledgers. 3 years' worth. Meticulously documented. And they show a pattern of embezzlement totaling over 300,000 taels. The court erupted in shocked whispers. Prime Minister Chen went pale. Furthermore, I continued, pulling out another document, we have evidence of bribery. Merchants seeking favorable trade contracts paid substantial sums to individuals in your household. Money that coincidentally disappeared into private accounts rather than the imperial treasury. These are lies, Chen sputtered, though his voice lacked conviction. Fabrications by my political enemies. Are the confessions of your own household servants also fabrications? Han's voice was cold as winter steel. They've provided detailed testimony about how the schemes were organized, where the money went, even which accounts were used to hide the funds. I watched Lady Chen as the evidence piled up. Her face had gone from confident to calculating to carefully blank. She was already preparing her defense, distancing herself from her father's crimes. But we weren't done. There is also, Han said quietly, and the court leaned forward to hear, the matter of the assassination attempt on our sons last week. A terrible tragedy, Prime Minister Chen said quickly. Thank the heavens they survived. But surely your Majesty doesn't suggest. The assassins were hired through an intermediary connected to your household. They've confessed. In detail. The court's whispers turned to gasps. This was beyond embezzlement. This was treason. And there's one more thing, I said, standing so everyone could see me clearly. Lady Chen, perhaps you'd like to explain to the court why you visited a fortune teller 3 days before the assassination to ask what would happen if Crown Prince Jen died before your wedding? All color drained from Lady Chen's face. That's ridiculous, I never. We have the fortune teller here, along with 3 witnesses who were present during your consultation. I gestured, and the nervous fortune teller was brought forward, along with her customers who'd overheard the conversation. Would you like them to repeat what you asked? What you said about preferring the younger prince if the elder were out of the way? Lady Chen's carefully constructed facade shattered. I didn't mean it was just idle speculation I never actually wanted. You consulted a fortune teller about my death 3 days before assassins tried to kill me, Jen said coldly, speaking for the first time. What were you speculating about, exactly? She opened her mouth, closed it, then did the worst possible thing. She turned to her father. Tell them. Tell them I knew nothing about the assassination. Tell them I was innocent. Prime Minister Chen stared at his daughter with the dawning horror of a man realizing he'd been betrayed. You told me you wanted to marry Jen. You said it was essential for our family's position. You were the one who insisted. Father, stop talking. But he was past stopping. Years of careful manipulation, desperate to save himself. You said if something happened to the crown prince, you could marry the younger one instead. You said he was more popular, more controllable. You planned all of this. Enough. Han's voice cracked like a whip. We've heard enough. The court was completely silent now, watching the Prime Minister and his daughter destroy each other. Prime Minister Chen, Han pronounced with terrible finality, you are hereby stripped of all titles and positions. Your assets are forfeit to the imperial treasury. You will be held in custody pending formal trial for embezzlement, bribery, and conspiracy to commit murder. If found guilty, the penalty is death. Chen collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. Lady Chen Suin, I said, my voice equally cold, you are stripped of your title and the betrothal to Crown Prince Jen is dissolved. You will be confined to a temple for the rest of your days, forbidden from court or marriage. Your property and dowry are forfeit. She stared at me with hatred so pure it was almost admirable. You did this. The merchant's daughter. You planned this from the beginning. No, I corrected. You did this. I simply made sure everyone knew about it. Guards moved forward to take them into custody. As they were led away, Prime Minister Chen still protesting his innocence and Lady Chen maintaining stony silence, I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. Then I turned my attention to the second part of our plan. The betrothal between Crown Prince Jen and Lady Chen is dissolved, Han announced formally. The Crown Prince is free to make his own choice of bride, subject to imperial approval. The court buzzed with speculation. Every noble family with an eligible daughter was already scheming. Jen stepped forward and bowed. Your Majesties, I request permission to marry Wei Lin, Chief Imperial Physician. The court erupted. A commoner. The Chief Physician? But she has no family connections. Your Majesty, this is unprecedented. Han raised his hand for silence. Unprecedented? The Empress herself was a merchant's daughter when we married her. Are you suggesting that was a mistake? No one was brave enough to say yes. Wei Lin has served this court with distinction, I added. Her medical reforms have saved countless lives. Her knowledge and skill are unmatched. And she has twice saved Crown Prince Jen's life. We find her eminently suitable. But the political implications. The political implications, Han said flatly, are that this empire values capability over bloodline. That marriage to our heir will be based on merit, not manipulation. Is that understood? The court subsided into grudging acceptance. Furthermore, Rui stepped forward, unable to hide his grin. I request permission to marry Lady Feng Lihua as planned. However, I also request that she be given an official position as Imperial Commerce Minister, with authority to reform trade practices and women's rights throughout the empire. That caused another uproar. Women's rights. A merchant as a minister? Your Highness, surely. Lady Feng has been managing one of the empire's largest commercial operations since she was 16, I said calmly. She has more practical experience in trade and economics than most of our current ministers combined. She has also been running a private charity helping women in difficult circumstances. We believe she would bring valuable perspective to imperial policy. I didn't mention the secret network. Not yet. That would be revealed later, on Li Hua's own terms. Your Majesties, an elderly minister ventured carefully, while we respect your judgment, the court is concerned about establishing precedent. If both princes marry according to personal preference rather than political strategy, then they'll have strong partnerships built on trust and mutual respect, Han finished. Like we do. And we've ushered in 15 years of unprecedented prosperity. Are you suggesting our marriage was a mistake? The minister wisely remained silent. These marriages are approved, Han declared. The weddings will take place in 1 month. Anyone who wishes to object may do so now. No one spoke. Then we are adjourned. As the court dispersed in scandalized clusters, I caught Jian and Rui's eyes. Both were trying to maintain princely dignity, but I could see the relief and joy underneath. They'd made their choices. Against tradition, against political pressure, against every convention. Just like their father and I had done. Later that evening, in our private chambers, Han pulled me into his arms. You know we've just made ourselves very unpopular with the traditionalist faction. Worth it. Both boys marrying commoners. Promoting women to positions of actual power. Valuing capability over bloodline. Terrible precedents. The empire might actually start functioning on merit. He laughed, that warm rumble I still loved after all these years. You're enjoying this? Immensely. Though I notice you didn't mention General Zhao's arrest for his affair with Lady Qian. I thought I'd save that for tomorrow. No point in overwhelming the court all at once. He brushed a kiss against my temple. Besides, I wanted to handle that personally. Can't have generals thinking they can seduce noble ladies without consequences. Even when the noble ladies are willing participants. Especially then. I turned in his arms to face him properly. We did well. With the boys, I mean. They chose wisely. They learned from the best. His expression turned serious. Though I hope you realize what we've started. If both princes marry outside traditional expectations, other nobles will follow. The entire court structure could change. Good. It's been getting stale anyway. I smiled at his concern. Besides, change is inevitable. Better to guide it than resist it. Spoken like a true revolutionary. I prefer the term pragmatist. The weddings took place on the same day, a grand celebration that had the entire capital in festive chaos. Wei Yilin arrived at the palace looking simultaneously terrified and determined in her wedding robes. I received her privately before the ceremony. Your Majesty. Mingyu, I corrected. We're going to be family. No need for such formality in private. She relaxed slightly. I'm not sure I know how to do this. Be a crown princess, I mean. I'm just a physician. You're not just anything. You're brilliant, capable, and you see my son as a person rather than a prize. That's all that matters. I adjusted her headdress, which was slightly crooked. The rest is just learning protocol and managing officials. I can teach you that. The important part, the partnership, you already understand. He talks about you and the emperor constantly. How you built this empire together. How you supported each other. It's a lot to live up to. Don't live up to us. Build something uniquely yours. Jian needs someone who challenges him, keeps him grounded, reminds him why he's doing this. You already do that naturally. Just keep doing it. I stepped back to examine her. Perfect. Now, let's go scandalize some traditionalists by having you marry my son. Lady Feng Lihua required no such reassurance. She arrived at the palace looking like she was preparing for a business negotiation rather than a wedding. Your Majesty, she said briskly when I greeted her, I have a list of reforms I'd like to propose for the Commerce Ministry. Also, I've drafted legislation regarding women's property rights, and I think we should establish official safe houses in every major city. I have detailed budgets and implementation timelines if you'd like to review them. I had to laugh. Perhaps we could get through the wedding first. Oh, yes. Of course. She looked slightly embarrassed. I'm just excited. Rui said I'd have actual authority to make changes, and I've been planning this for years, and she stopped herself. Sorry. I'm babbling. You're passionate. It's refreshing. I took her hands. Welcome to the family, Lihua. I think you and I are going to accomplish great things together. I hope so. There's so much to do, so many women who need help, so many systems that need changing. And you'll have imperial support to do it. But first, we marry you to my son. Then we change the world. The ceremony was magnificent. Both couples stood before the assembled court, traditional vows spoken with voices clear and steady. I watched Jen and Wei Lin exchange looks of such genuine affection that several court ladies sighed. Rui and Lihua held hands throughout, her grip tight enough that I could see white knuckles, him radiating protective pride. When it was done, when they were officially married and the court had to accept these unconventional unions, Han leaned over and whispered, "No going back now. Would you want to?" Not for anything in the world. The celebration feast lasted deep into the night. I made my rounds, enduring congratulations from ministers who were clearly calculating new political alliances and sympathy from traditionalists who thought we'd made terrible mistakes. But I also saw the younger nobles watching our sons and their new wives with something like hope. The merchants celebrating that one of their own had married a prince. The physicians toasting Wei Lin's elevation. The women whispering about Lihua's new position and what it might mean. Change was coming. We'd opened the door. Now it was up to the next generation to walk through it. Later, I found myself on a balcony overlooking the celebration, taking a moment of quiet amid the chaos. Wei Lin joined me, moving with a physician's silent efficiency. Overwhelming? I asked. Somewhat. But I'm managing. She leaned against the railing. Can I ask you something? Of course. Was it hard? Going from being divorced and disgraced to being empress? How did you handle everyone who said you didn't belong here? I considered the question. The first year was difficult. Some officials were openly hostile. Court ladies whispered whenever I passed. Every decision was questioned, every action scrutinized. They wanted me to fail. What did you do? I worked harder than everyone else. I proved I belonged here through competence rather than bloodline. And I had your father-in-law beside me, making it clear that insulting me meant insulting the emperor. I smiled at the memory. Eventually, they either accepted me or learned to hide their contempt. Either way, I got things done. And now I'm just the empress. Some people still remember where I came from, but it's irrelevant. I've earned my place 10 times over. I looked at her directly. You'll do the same. You already have, actually. You saved Jen's life twice. You're revolutionizing imperial medicine. You've proven yourself repeatedly. Anyone who questions your worth is a fool, and you can ignore them. She nodded slowly. Thank you. That helps. Though I should warn you, being married to a crown prince comes with unique challenges. Everyone will want something from you. Access to Jen, imperial favor, political support. You'll have to learn to navigate those requests without compromising your integrity. I'm good at saying no to people. Excellent. You'll need that skill constantly. I paused. Also, Jen tends to work himself to exhaustion when he's stressed. You'll need to force him to rest occasionally. He gets that from me. I've noticed. Last month, he spent 4 days straight reviewing tax reforms without sleeping. I had to threaten to prescribe him sedatives before he'd stop. Perfect. You'll manage him wonderfully. I touched her shoulder gently. Welcome to the family, Wei Lin. I'm glad you're here. She smiled, genuine warmth breaking through her nervousness. So am I. The years that followed were a study in controlled revolution. Wei Lin transformed imperial medicine with the same quiet efficiency she brought to everything else. Within 2 years, every major city had public clinics staffed by trained physicians. Infant mortality dropped. Disease outbreaks were contained faster. Medical knowledge was standardized and shared rather than hoarded. The traditionalists complained that she was overstepping, that a crown princess shouldn't be so involved in administration. She ignored them completely and kept working. Jen supported her absolutely, often accompanying her on inspection tours of new clinics and making it clear that her work had full imperial backing. Li Hua's reforms were more dramatic. She established official safe houses in every province, staffed by women trained in both security and counseling. She drafted and pushed through legislation that protected women's property rights even after marriage. She revolutionized the Commerce Ministry's operations, rooting out corruption and establishing transparent practices that increased tax revenue by 30%. The traditionalists hated her. The common people adored her. Rui stood beside her through every controversy, his military popularity lending weight to her reforms. When conservative officials tried to block her legislation, he'd show up at court sessions in full general's regalia, casual hand on his sword, and ask if anyone wanted to debate the issue further. Remarkably, they usually didn't. "Your sons' wives are terrifying," Han observed one evening as we reviewed reports of Li Hua's latest victory over the Ministry of Rights. "They're effective. There's a difference." The Minister of Rights literally retired rather than continue opposing Li Hua's reforms. Well, he was 78 and corrupt. It was time. Han laughed. "You're enjoying this far too much. I spent 15 years building the foundation. It's satisfying to watch the next generation build on it." I set down the reports. Though I admit, sometimes they move faster than I would have dared. They have the advantage of our example. We already broke the major barriers. They're just walking through doors we opened. Some doors. They're kicking down quite a few on their own. 5 years after the weddings, I became a grandmother 3 times over. Wei Yilin gave birth to a daughter first, a tiny, serious-faced infant they named Mai, who apparently emerged from the womb frowning at the inefficiency of being born. "She's perfect," Jen said, cradling her with reverent terror. "And I have no idea what to do with her." "Figure it out the same way you figure out everything else," I advised. "Carefully, methodically, and by consulting expert sources." Wei Yilin is already writing a manual on infant care based on the latest medical research. Of course she is. Li Hua gave birth to twin girls 6 months later, robust and loud infants who screamed in perfect harmony and seemed determined to dismantle the palace one block at a time. "Twins," Rui said wonderingly, watching them sleep in their cribs. "Like me and Jen. Like you and father. A family tradition at this point. They're going to be trouble. I can already tell. Undoubtedly. But they'll also be brilliant. Just like their mother." As I stood in the nursery watching my granddaughters sleep, I felt the weight of years and choices and unexpected blessings. 3 tiny girls who would grow up in an empire their grandmother had helped transform. Who would never be told they couldn't pursue medicine or commerce or anything else because of their gender. Who would see their mothers wielding real power and think nothing of doing the same. "What are you thinking?" Han asked, appearing beside me with that silent warrior tread he'd never quite lost. "That we've come a long way from that day you proposed in the Chen family hall." "Regrets?" "Not a single one." I leaned into his warmth. "You. Only that I didn't find you sooner. We could have had more years together. The years we had were exactly right. Everything happened when it needed to happen." I watched little Mai yawn in her sleep. "And look what we built. Not just an empire, but a family. A legacy. They'll surpass us, you know. Our sons and their wives. They're already doing things we only imagined." "Good. That's exactly what they should do. Each generation should exceed the previous one." I smiled. Though I'll admit, I'm curious to see what these 3 girls accomplish. Between Mai's seriousness and the twins' chaos, they're going to reshape this empire in ways we can't even predict. 10 years after the weddings, Han and I made a decision. We were getting older. Not old, precisely, but tired. A decade and a half of ruling an empire with absolute authority took its toll. We'd accomplished everything we'd set out to do and more. It was time to pass the responsibility to younger, more energetic hands. "You're abdicating?" Jen looked stunned when we told him. "But you're still healthy. Still sharp. The empire needs you." "The empire needs fresh leadership," Han corrected gently. "We've been planning this for years." "You're ready." "I'm not sure I am." "I wasn't sure either when I accepted the throne," Han said. "But I had your mother beside me. You have Wei Yilin. That's all you really need. Someone who sees clearly when you're lost. There's also the fact that your mother and I would like to actually enjoy our remaining years, I added. We've spent 2 decades governing, building, fighting. I'd like to travel. See parts of the empire we've only read reports about. Maybe even go beyond our borders. Have adventures that don't involve political intrigue for once. Adventures? Rui grinned. At your age? We're not that old, Han said dryly. And I think we've earned some adventures. The coronation ceremony was different from our own. Less about proving legitimacy, more about celebrating continuity. Jian and Wei Lin took their places on the imperial thrones with grace and confidence. Rui stood beside them, having accepted the position of crown prince and military commander, ready to support his brother the same way they'd always supported each other. I stood in the crowd this time rather than on the dais, watching my son become emperor and his brilliant commoner wife become empress. The court had long since given up opposing the changes our family brought. The proof was in the results. Prosperity, stability, innovation. Everything they claimed traditional methods would provide, achieved through completely untraditional means. Ready to be ordinary citizens? Han whispered as the ceremony concluded. We'll never be ordinary. But yes, I'm ready to step back. I took his hand. Where should we go first? I've always wanted to see the southern provinces. The coast. Maybe even take a ship across the sea. An adventure, then. The next one. Together. As we left the coronation, slipping away quietly while attention focused on the new emperor and empress, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. From that terrible day in the Chen family hall to this moment of peaceful transition. From desperate survival to building a legacy. From being called barren and worthless to creating an empire where those labels meant nothing. The best revenge truly was living so well that your enemies became irrelevant. Chen Wei had died years ago, mad and forgotten. Yun Mai perished in exile, her branded face the last thing anyone remembered about her. The entire Chen family had faded into obscurity, their name a cautionary tale. Meanwhile, I'd become the empress who transformed an empire. The woman whose unconventional marriage became the model for the next generation. The merchant's daughter who proved bloodline mattered less than capability. And now, I would become something simpler. A woman traveling with her husband, seeing the world they'd helped build, enjoying the freedom they'd earned through decades of hard work. No regrets? Han asked as we reached our private quarters, already packed for departure. I thought about that question seriously. About the pain and betrayal that had started everything. About the risks we'd taken, the enemies we'd made, the conventions we'd shattered. About the years of struggle and triumph. Not one, I said honestly. Every choice led us here. And here is exactly where I want to be. He pulled me close, pressing a kiss to my forehead. Then let's begin the next chapter. We left the capital the next morning, 2 ordinary travelers on horseback with a small escort. No imperial procession, no grand announcement. Just us, the open road, and the future stretching out ahead. Behind us, Emperor Jian and Empress Wei Lin were already implementing new reforms. Princess Li Hua was establishing trade routes to distant kingdoms. Our granddaughters were growing up fierce and brilliant, already showing signs of the remarkable women they'd become. The empire was in good hands. The legacy was secure. And we were free. As we rode through the city gates and onto the southern road, I looked back one last time at the palace that had been my home for 15 years. Then I turned forward, toward whatever adventures waited. The best revenge, I'd learned, wasn't destruction of enemies or accumulation of power. It was building a life so extraordinary that the past became irrelevant. It was finding partnership so strong that convention couldn't touch it. It was creating a legacy that would outlive you. And it was knowing, absolutely and completely, that you'd chosen wisely. I'd chosen wisely that day in the Chen family hall when Prince Han offered me his hand. And I'd choose him again, every single day, for the rest of our lives. Subscribe to Lotus Tale Studios for more epic tales of revenge, redemption, and love that defies convention. Hit that like button if you believe the best revenge is living extraordinarily well. Drop a comment telling me which moment in this journey moved you most. And turn on notifications so you never miss our next story. Until next time, may you always choose partners who see you, build legacies that matter, and live lives so magnificent that your enemies become footnotes in your triumph.